Spring Framework 7 and Spring Boot 4 are right around the corner. On this channel, we'll take a look at a lot of those features. Today, I want to talk about Jackson 3 support in Spring Boot 4. Now, if you've been around Java for a while or Spring, then you probably heard of Jackson, but if you're new, that's okay. Jackson is a set of libraries around data processing, primarily used these days for JSON. So taking Java objects and serializing them to JSON, and then taking JSON and deserializing them into Java objects. And so there's a whole suite of tools around this. And we're going to talk about the change to Jackson 3. So primarily up till now, we've used something called Jackson 2. A new version came out, and now we'll be using a mix of 2 and 3 in Spring Boot 4, and I'll talk about why in a second. So I'm going to give you a couple resources, but we're gonna dive through a lot of examples today. So I'm going to head over here to the browser. There's a really great article by my coworker, Sebastian Deleuze, on introducing Jackson 3 support in Spring. This is a part of the blog post series called The Road to GA. A new blog post is coming out every week about some feature in Spring Framework 7 or Spring Boot 4, and this is no different. So this one goes through, first off, a close collaboration between Spring and Jackson. It was really great to see the collaboration here. One of the things they had to tackle was allowing Jackson 2 and Jackson 3 side by side. If you want to read through, there's an issue on that. So Jackson 3 moves their baseline to JDK 17. Being able to align the Jackson and Spring defaults about JSON Views. We'll look at some examples of JSON Views today, and then a few other things. So if you want to go through, read this, there's a lot of really great information in there about that. Now we're going to go through an example today. This is the donut shop. I felt like having a donut today, but I don't have any. So the next best thing was to be able to create this repo. And what I'll do is I'll copy in this README into the new project that we create so that we can go through and make sure we touch on all of the things that I've put in here. So the first thing that we're going to do is head over to start.spring.io. I'm going to choose Java, Maven, the latest version of Spring Boot 4, which is now release candidate 2. So we are getting closer and closer. I'm going to create a new project called dev.danvega. We'll call this the donut shop. And let's just call this donuts. And then all we need to bring in is the web support. I'm going to have some web endpoints, but the web starter, the Spring Boot starter web, will transitively bring in the Spring Boot starter JSON, which brings in the Jackson support. And the first thing we do when we open this up in IntelliJ is we'll take a look at the dependencies so that we can see Jackson 2 and 3 kind of side by side. So I think we have everything we need. We'll go ahead and click generate. This will download a zip. You can open it up in your favorite text editor or IDE. I'll open it up in IntelliJ. We have what we need. Let's write some code. All right, so this is the README that you will find in the final repository, and it just goes through the things that we're going to learn today. So we're going to talk about Jackson 2 and 3 compatibility. We'll talk about some key changes in Jackson 3 that you'll need to know, including the JsonMapper, which replaces the ObjectMapper. We'll talk about why and what are the benefits there. Some application properties that you may want to toggle or twist some knobs for. And then we'll end on some JSON views, both on the server and on the client. So the first thing is the Jackson 2 and 3 compatibility. You will see basically 2 versions of Jackson. So if we go over to, you can do this a couple ways, right? If you wanted to, you can go over to the Palm and you see that we bring in Spring Boot Starter Web MVC, which brings in a Spring Boot Starter Jackson. We go into Jackson and we can see that Spring Boot Jackson is here, and this brings in version 3.0.1. That's a long way of doing it, but you can do it. I'm using Maven, so I could go into my dependencies here and say, what's going on here? So if I look at WebMVC, how do I get that over? We can see Spring Boot Starter Jackson is there. We see the tools.jackson from 3.0.1, and we'll also see, I believe, the version 2, which is in here somewhere. So that's one way of doing it. You can also drill down into the external libraries here. So all this to say, depending on what we're doing, you'll have some different package imports. The 3.0 one changes the package. So that will come from tools.jackson. And then the shared annotations, this is why we're bringing in 2 still. So we'll see some of the annotations being used. That is going to bring in from the com.fasterxml.jackson core package. So in this README, I have some information about upgrading. That's one of the things you'll want to look for when moving from Spring Boot, say 3.5.7 to Spring Boot 4. Okay, so yeah, some key changes. That package we just talked about. Builder-based configuration. So Jackson 3 requires immutable thread-safe configuration. So before we were using something like the ObjectMapper, that was mutable. So you can create an instance of that. You can change state later. Jackson 3 has an immutable builder pattern. This is becoming very relevant everywhere, right? Like I see this pattern a lot these days. So we have this immutable builder pattern. We take a JSON mapper, we build it, we can enable things, disable things, we build an instance of it, and then we use it. Everything is kind of locked in there. This, we'll see an example of this. You can do this. You can create your own instance of a JSON mapper, but we also get an instance through the Spring application context. One has been created for us with some default properties, and it also reads from properties that we change. So we can go ahead and grab that as well. Some date serialization has changed. So Jackson 2 write dates as timestamp is true. So we're getting these timestamps out of here. Jackson 3 by default sets that to false. And now we get those nice looking ISO strings. And then finally, unchecked exceptions. Jackson 3 switches from a checked to an unchecked exception, significant improvement for modern Java development. So you would catch something like a JSON processing exception. This was checked, everything inherited from, I believe, IO exception or exception. And now we have this Jackson exception, which is an unchecked runtime exception. And there are some reasons why you would want to do this, right? The biggest things in kind of modern Java that we're writing, we get that Lambda compatibility issue. So checked exceptions can't be thrown from a Lambda expression. Stream API friction requires some awkward wrapping in try-catch or helper methods, unnecessary boilerplate, and runtime nature. So again, some benefits of it. We can use it here in a Lambda. So there's some information on that. So the next thing is the JsonMapper, the new way of kind of handling, reading, and writing JsonMapper. So there's some information in here, but I'm going to demo this off. All right, so let's go into our resources folder. I'm going to create a new data folder. So data, and we're going to paste in a file here called donuts menu. And this just has some donuts in here. The type, glaze, toppings, price is vegan, calories, and the time that it was baked at. So what we want to do is we want to create a script, if you will. So in this case, it's going to be a command line runner, something that when the application starts, will read that JSON file and load some data. So I'm going to call this DataLoader. I'm going to take me off the screen here because we want to look at some code. So we're going to implement the command line runner. To do that, we got to implement a method called run, and that is where we will put the kind of code that is going to read from that JSON file. Now, to do that, I'm going to do a couple of things. So I need a logger, so I'm going to get a logger. We are going to say static final string. Let's call this the donuts JSON path, and this is going to be class path. Data / donuts. What did we call it? Donuts menu. So let's make sure we have that. Donuts menu.json, and that is our path to our file. That is a class path. So then we'll get a JSON mapper. So again, this is new, and you see the new package there, tools.jackson.databind.json, and we'll call this a JSON mapper. I'm also going to get a resource loader. So resource loader, and I'm going to create a list of donuts, and we'll call these donuts, right? So right away, we are going to need a class called donuts. Let's go ahead and create a record for this. So I'm going to say donut. This is going to be a record, and we're going to take in a bunch of things here. So type, we'll have something called glaze in a second. We will have a list of strings called toppings. We will get a big decimal price. We have a Boolean. Let's call this is vegan. And then an integer calories. And then, and then a local date time, which was baked at. Okay, so I think that is everything. I am going to stick a JSON format on our big decimal here, and then we'll create an enum for glaze. Let's just create this inline because I won't need it anywhere else. So I have this enum called glaze. So now I have a donut, and I have a list of donuts, and we can do a couple of things. So as I mentioned before, we can ask Spring for an instance of the JSON mapper. It is going to create one for us, add it to the application context. We are adding it to the constructor here. This is the same as saying something like @AutoWired, but there's only one constructor here, so that's kind of implicit. We don't need to do that. I'm also going to get a resource loader. So resource loader, this dot resource loader equals that. Okay, so those are the things that we need to kind of set up our data loader. So now in the run method, this is where we are going to create our donuts. So or load our donuts. So let's go ahead and say log.info loading donuts, and we need an emoji for that, right? Let's get an emoji. Donut, yeah, that looks good. So now we're loading donuts that way. So what I want to start with is a try. And in this try block, I'm going to start with a resource, and we'll call this resource, and we'll use this resource loader to get our resource from our donuts JSON path. So if the resource does not exist, we want to do something here. We want to just say that file was not found, and we will go ahead and return. If it is found, what we want to do is use the new JSON mapper. So we're going to say JSONMapper.read value. We're going to read from the resources input stream. So we're going to get that input stream. And then we're going to go ahead and use the donut.class as the type that we're going to serialize that to. So we have, actually, we do not want that. Let's back up. Sorry, Dan. This was me blindly thinking that the robots were correct. That is not what we want to do because we're going to read in a list of them, right? So what we want here is actually a new type reference. So type reference, and we can just leave that generic. And now that should be what we want. And so now from there, we can just say this dot donuts is equal to that. So now we've read all of the donuts in there, and we've assigned them to that. That we can go ahead and print them out. So I can say, let's just say donuts dot for each, sure. And then we can just go ahead and say system.out.println, and that should work. So before we test some serialization, let's just test out that we are able to read in this JSON file. So this is not going to work first. And this is always the hint to me that I forgot something, because DataLoader is not being used. Wait a minute, it should just automatically run because of the command line runner. And that's because I haven't marked this as a component yet. And then this is telling me maybe final. Yeah, I don't know why I didn't make that a final. That should be that. All right, so now let's see if we can go ahead and run our application. Oh yeah, we didn't set ours. We didn't do some catches here. In this case, I'm going to catch. I mentioned this before. We can catch the new Jackson exception. So I'm going to say E, and log error loading donuts. Sure. If we want to catch anything else, we can go ahead and do that and just say throw E. Sure. So now this should be okay, and convert field to a local. Okay, so no, because at some point I'm going to have a method, and might as well just do this now. Yes, called return donuts, because we'll use this elsewhere. So let's go ahead and run this application and see if we can load some donuts, and it looks like we have. So all of the donuts from the JSON file are here, and we printed them out to the console. So that's good. So the next thing I want to do, we'll kind of jump through this real quick, is I want to validate the serialization of donuts. So I want to take like a single donut and make sure that we can serialize it. So this is going to be a private method that is just going to take in a list of donuts. Sure, I'm going to actually write this out, but thanks for trying to do that for me. So I'm going to use that new JsonMapper. And just like the old way of doing things with the ObjectMapper, there is a method called writeValueAsString. And maybe I just want to get the first, not get first. Yes, I just want to get the first one and write this out. So we can go ahead and say that this is some JSON. And I'll go ahead and say log.info. Sure, that looks good. And we do want to go ahead and catch a Jackson exception here. And yes, there was an error serializing that donut. Okay, so now let's go ahead and run this again. And we should read from the JSON file. We should print out all of the donuts in that file. And then we're going to take the first one and try to serialize that back into JSON. And so we see, here it is here. We serialize this donut. Here's the type, glaze, all the way down. And you see by default now we are using that ISO string instead of the timestamp. All right, so if we go back over to this article, one of the things I want to highlight here is adapting to the new default settings. Jackson 3 has changed some default settings compared to Jackson 2. So you either need to adapt your test accordingly or customize Jackson 3's configuration. The changes most likely to break tests are these two. So if you're comparing, sort properties alphabetically is now set to true. And then again, we talked about the right date as timestamps has been changed to false to favor the ISO string dates. So with something like sort properties alphabetically, there is a property that you can go ahead and change. I also want to point out that we got this instance of the JSonMapper from Spring. It created it with some defaults based on configuration. If you wanted to, you can also come in here and say this.JSonMapper is equal to JsonMapper dot, and you can grab the builder, and then you can go ahead and do some things like disable, so mapper feature dot alphabetically, sort properties alphabetically, right? So you can disable that feature if you want, build an instance of it, and now you have it. Don't recommend doing this. You don't need to, because everything that you need to configure, you can go into properties and do, so not a big deal there. But those are a couple properties that you want to think about. Also, I think this one, let's just go ahead and I'm going to just output this. So JSON, another one you might want to look at. So if we go into application.yaml, under Spring, Jackson, serialization. No, that's not what I asked for. I asked for serialization. There's the input or indent output. We can go ahead and turn that on to true. So if we go ahead and rerun this and we take a look at that one that we serialized, now we've kind of indented that output. Now we can like see that instead of having it like in a single line. So for this, I would go ahead and take a look at these Spring Boot 4 docs here. If you look at customizing the Jackson JsonMapper, you can see these different things that you can go ahead and customize in here. And there's a lot of great information on that there. All right, so the last feature I want to look at here is JSON Views. And this is not something new. This is something we've been able to do before, but there is a new addition to being able to serialize only a portion of your data based on a JSON view. So imagine that you're building out a Donut API and you need to serve different clients with different data requirements. You have a mobile, a public, an internal, an admin. We have some traditional approaches to this, but we would create multiple DTOs for every single endpoint. This gets very cumbersome, right? You have multiple controllers or tons of mappings for different DTOs, right? This creates DTO class proliferation. We have repetitive mapping codes, maintenance nightmares, easy to mistake and expose data wrong. So what is the solution? Jackson's JSON view. Again, we've had this ability before, but we're going to take this, show this, and then we'll see kind of one of the new features here. So I'm going to open up my donut here, and I'm just going to copy and paste some code because it's not interesting to watch me type this. So we're going to set some views, and we're going to say like, hey, this one and this one are part of the summary. These are public. Maybe these are internal. We don't want to expose those to the outside world. So how do we do this? We're going to create a public class called view, and it's going to have some interfaces on it. So let's go ahead and say public class. We are going to call this views, and I'm going to paste some code in here, and we have some interfaces. So we have things like summary. We have public, which extends summary. We have internal, which extends public. And then maybe an admin that extends internal. We're not actually using this right here. So because of this views class, we can say views.summary. So we can say, hey, this thing is included in this views.public class, right? Or this views.summary class. And really what this allows us to do is control the output. So if I go to create a new class, let's go ahead and call this the donut controller. This will be a REST controller. We'll have a REST request mapping on this /API/donuts. And we're going to bring in that data loader. So actually, let me get a logger first. And then we'll bring in that data loader because remember I had that method on there to get all of the donuts. So we don't need to load those again. And we'll get this through constructor injection. So I'm going to just copy a few of these in here. So let's go ahead like this. And now you can see that we have a get summary, which basically gets all the donuts. But it's a view. So we use the @JSON view annotation. Notice where that's coming from. So again, that's the JSON 2.2 or whatever version we're pulling in, right? Jackson 2, because that's the annotation. And we're saying, hey, the view is views.summary. So whatever is marked as a summary will be exposed in this endpoint. And we do the same for public and internal and admin. So if I go ahead and rerun this application, we see everything get loaded. If we make a request to HTTP localhost 8080/API/donuts/summary, we'll see that we only get certain fields in that summary. Maybe we want to do something like public. So we can say public, and then we see we get more information about that. So this is a great way to control what information is deserialized into JSON. But what if, actually, let me go back to that controller. What if we wanted to control what information was being serialized and sent over the wire? So I'm going to copy this example here, and we'll use this in a second. So we have this create donut, and it takes in a request body. But what it does is it takes on just a JSON view. So we send just, even though we're going to construct an entire object, we are only going to send over the bits that we care about. In this case, the summary one, the rest of it should not be included, right? And so how do we do this? I think I have this in the README. Let's go ahead and look at this. So before what we had to do, before Spring Boot 4.0, you had to send a request filtered fields. You needed to use this wrapper. So you had to say new mapping Jackson value, which is a user. Again, this is mutable. And you had to set based on that view. And then you can go ahead and send that. You're basically sending the wrapper over the wire that contains just the bits that you want, but that's not the actual object, right? So we can get away with this in Spring Boot 4 and kind of clean this up. So let's go ahead. I'm going to create a new class and I'm going to call this my client app. And we're going to construct a new client app so that my app is currently running on localhost 8080. I'm going to simulate a client here. So I'm going to go ahead and get a logger. I am going to use a RestClient, and we'll get this through constructor injection here. I need a builder, call this builder, and let's see, builder.build. Sure, we need to set the base URL. So let's say base URL. Actually, I don't want that as the base, just want this, right? And now I have a REST client. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to implement the application runner. We'll go ahead and implement that method. And for this, I'll go ahead and say public static void main string args. We're going to say new Spring application builder. And we'll pass in our client app dot class. And we will say for the web, we don't actually want to have a web application. We'll say web application type.none, because if not, we would clash with the one running on 8080, and we'll just run those args. So now what I want to do is I want to construct a donut. So I'm going to create a simple donut here in my run method. This is going to have all of the fields in there. But what I want to be able to do is, and yeah, let me just kind of log this too. So we'll say that, hey, let's go ahead and use this new feature that says we only want to send what's available in this view across the wire. So how do we do that? So we use our REST client. So we say REST client dot post. We're going to post to this new method. So we need the URI for this. I have this at API/donuts, right? Let's look. This is at a post mapping for API/donuts. Good. So we have that. And what we want to do now is we want to send a hint. And this hint is going to take a JSON view .class.getName, and we're going to pass views.summary.class, right? So we'll say, what is the body? It's that client donut that we have. We're going to go ahead and retrieve whatever we get back from it, and the body of that should be a donut. So donut.class. Now we can get a variable back from that, and we'll just call this the response. So then we can go ahead and S out the response, and that looks good. So now I can run this application. What is going on here? Convert to a record class. Yeah, no, nice try though. All right, so I have this. I have this class here. This is implementing the application runner. So when we start this up, this is going to get run. We're going to call new Spring application builder.run, and then this gets run. So we'll create a donut. We're going to send a post request to /API/donuts on localhost 8080, which is already running. And what we should see in the logs here is that we've gotten the type and the price, but all of these should be null because they're not included in the summary view. So it's just a way of saying no matter what the object is here, we are controlling what is being serialized and sent across the wire. So let's try and run this. Okay, and we got an error. Is this because, yep. So I've been mentioning this a lot in Spring Boot 4, Spring Framework 7, we've moved to kind of modularization of some of the auto configuration that we have. Instead of kind of including all of it, we have to kind of split some things out now. One of those is I'm using a REST client here. So I'm going to say Spring Boot REST client. And I'll go ahead and bring that in, and I'll reload that. And let's try this again. RestClient builder could not be found. I don't know what's going on. It's just one of those days. So let's go ahead and fix this. Now we don't have to worry about where this thing is coming from, and it's just for a test, so it's okay. 405 method not allowed. So let's say localhost 8080 / API / donuts. So this is a post mapping to /API / donuts. That looks right. Oh, patch. Why did I type patch? Okay, let's try this again. 400 bad request. So it is saying that timestamp status 400 bad request to that. All right, I think the problem is with my donut. I think it has to do with that. Let's go back to our application, stop and rerun. Go back to my client app and try to run that now. And no, 400 timestamp status bad request. All right, so this is a bad request into our donut controller here. This is taking a request body in, but only taking in a couple fields, and we're trying to construct a donut. So something is happening when we're trying to create a donut here. And I believe, yeah, it probably is this. So we're using a primitive type here, so we can't assign null to this. Let's try and change that to a Boolean. Let's go back to our application, rerun this one. Okay, now let's go back to our client app and try and start that up. And there we go. So it went through okay. So we see that we passed just the things that are part of summary, which is the type and the price, but everything else is being sent in as null. So that was the issue. But again, from the client app standpoint, now we can construct an object here and only say what we want to be serialized into JSON here and sent over the wire, which in this case is just whatever's in views.summary. So that's it. That is Jackson 3 in Spring Framework 7 and Spring Boot 4. Again, I say Jackson 3, but we're kind of handling Jackson 2 and 3 side by side for compatibility issues. But the new package in there, tools.jackson, that includes that JSON mapper. Really like this JSON mapper. Again, it is immutable instead of the ObjectMapper, which was mutable. So we'll get some benefits out of that. Yeah, but Jackson 3, you can take advantage of what's new in Jackson 3 here. The JSON mapper, some of those properties you want to be check up on if you are migrating from a previous version. Because some of those might throw you off or throw those tests off that you have written against that. So those are some things to look at. But all in all, a great new addition, and not just in Spring Framework or Spring Boot. This is something that is happening across the ecosystem of projects. So again, hats off to the Spring team for making this change and getting it in all across the ecosystem there. This was fun to put together. I learned some new things. I hope you did too. If you did, you know what to do. Leave me a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and as always, friends, happy coding.